In this video, I'll talk about psychic income. When you pick the Webster's dictionary or the Oxford dictionary, or it's like a dictionary from Cambridge, or you just do it in a postmodern way, you go on Google or Bing. When you look for psychic income, you'll get a definition like this: the satisfaction or the relief that someone gets from doing their job or participating in an activity. And it differs from an actual objective income, like your monthly wage. So a psychic income is really an emotional or mental compensation someone experiences because of their participation into an activity. Now, to explain this, you need to understand that the human being has three core needs: the need for safety, which relates to our physical body, the need for security, and need for significance. And security implies an environment in which our safety is guaranteed, as well as where we can flourish in our need for significance. But I'm going to focus on the need for significance here, because that is what psychic income is related to. And to some extent it relates to our need for security, but psychic income has to do with a compensation we crave for to meet our need for significance. It works like this: when someone is in an oppressive situation and you expect the individual to comply with the oppressive situation, then you can't expect the individual to continue with their compliance while the individual is fully aware that they're being exploited and abused. Because somewhere the brain will have enough, and the individual will snap and very bad things will happen. So you don't want the individual to know that he or she is oppressed, nor that he or she is exploited. So what do? You offer them a compensation for complying with the situation. And this compensation doesn't have to be material. If the compensation is material, it's quite ineffective in the long run, because then you want more of that material, and sooner or later you'll realize that this material is quite limited. So you don't focus on material compensation like gold, silver, or currency in general. You focus on mental and emotional compensation. Okay, let me give an example. Let's say you have an abusive marriage, okay? Or maybe not an abusive marriage, but an abusive romantic relationship. By the way, romance by itself is a hoax. I've explained it before. I only use the word romantic because people will know what I'm talking about here. A sexual relationship between two people of the opposite sex. But okay, in a marriage/romantic relationship that's oppressive, you have the narcissist that wants admiration and validation at all costs. Now the narcissist knows very well that he, let's say he, is part of a community. That if he, without limits, assaults his wife, people are going to notice things and he'll be in trouble. But at the same time, he has no intention of facing himself nor looking for help. So he wants both the wife to comply with this selfish, his selfish tyranny. All tyranny is selfish, but okay. He both wants that, and he wants the community to remain quiet and shut up, so nobody would hold him accountable. So what will the narcissist do? The narcissist, if it's a he, and he's the one that's using his wife, he will then turn around and begin to blame one of the kids for the dysfunction in the family. And let's say the wife now has this deep rooted issue of rejection. and therefore she craves acceptance. She now will likely project with her narcissistic husband their frustration on one of the children. And by doing this, she and her husband are on the same line and they feel connected again. And this feeling of reconnection triggers her mind to relive the phase in which she fell in love with the guy. So then she feels if the honeymoon phase is back. So now she is complying with her husband in child abuse. Well, consciously, in her mind, she knows very well this doesn't add up. But her deep-rooted need for significance, which every human being has, overrules her rationality. This is not an excuse, but that's what's going on. Because she gets this psychic income from her husband, by complying against one of her own children, she is now at ease. And it's this psychic outcome that she is craving after now. So now she herself will initiate fights with that scapegoated child, and then the husband will come in and begin to scream at the kid or hit the kid. And at the same time, she now has become narcissistic also. She can complain to relatives and friends that her husband is terrible and that she can't leave the man. And now the people who hear her story will feel sorry for her, and now they will send loving vibrations to her because they want to help her because she's the victim. Now that's another psychic income she gets. So now she is using both the scapegoated child as well as her narcissistic husband. But the people in the environment don't see the whole situation. They only see a wife who's being mistreated by her husband asking for help. They don't realize that she is a full compliance in the dysfunction, and that she's a perpetrator also, by both enabling her dangerous husband as well as endangering her own kids. So she's not innocent at all. But the people around also crave psychic income. There's a woman in need, and they're doing the good thing, like white knights, talking to relate to the men, by helping her out. And those men often have their own frustrations in daily life, and now they have an opportunity to dump it all on the narcissistic husband, who according to them deserves to be treated badly because he mistreats his wife. So there's dual psychic income here. The psychic income of hearing thank you of a woman in need, and the psychic income of dumping their frustrations on another target. So in this situation, who is the real victim here? The real victim is the scapegoated child, of course, who now has become a teenager with much mental dysfunction. Because everyone around that child, who's now a teenager, craves a psychic income. And their sole interest was to maintain their psychic income and to defend their psychic income. Now, that teenager will develop mental issues. It can go two ways. Either he or she realizes something's completely wrong and she looks for deliverance, or they will seek relief also. And sooner or later they'll either end up addicted to drugs or to alcohol or to partying, or they end up in some extremist religious cult, and in those addictions with those other people, he or she will experience psychic income also. And that's how the cycle is preserved from generation to generation. That doesn't mean that the scapegoated kid now is a narcissist also. No, he or she is not. But he or she does operate in a narcissistic mindset. And by doing that, he or she is now participating in a generational curse or in a transgenerational violence. And this they will transfer onto their own kids. So it's not like some pastor said once on YouTube that victims become victimized. That's not true. Victims, if they don't seek for deliverance, will develop a victim mentality. And a victim mentality will increase the likelihood of someone becoming perpetrator themselves. But that doesn't have to be. Okay. Now that I explained what a psychic income is, you can now apply this knowledge to examine things around you. Now you will understand why, on a societal level, most of the time nothing really changes. Now you understand that despite people voting year after year, things remain the same or they become worse. Often people blame it on the politicians. But I already spoke about politics before, so I'm not going into that right now. The main reason why things often don't change for the better, because things do change, but often the change simply means that the issues are shifted from one group to another, or that things become worse. The reason why things don't change for the better on a collective scale is because people have a vested interest in the status quo. Okay, let's think about prostitution for a moment. I'm going to use what I just explained to you about psychic income, and I'm going to reveal to you why prostitution isn't dealt with by societies. It comes down to this. As a society, because remember, society is a fear construct in which people want to avoid things on a collective scale. In a society, everyone wants their needs to be met. But for the needs of everyone to be met, people need to collide with one another. So they need to be motivated in this collision. Now, what will motivate people in the long run, for the long term, to collide together? There needs to be something in it for them. And it becomes obvious after a while that not everyone can have their expectations met. So people will need to concede expectations. So people will need to deal with frustration. An example given, let's say you take the British Isles, for example, during the Roman era. No, before Rome was occupied, before Britain was occupied by Rome. Let's go to that time. Yet maybe a million people on the British Isles. Let's make up a number now for the example's sake. And you had different tribes living here and there. In the south of the British Isles, it was quite warm. It was close to the Mediterranean. In the north, that means towards Caledonia, what they call Scotland, it was colder. Now, let's say that people living near the north crave for grapes. They long for grapes. I say that's one thing they want, one thing they're craving after. Why? Because they want wine. Because a lot of folks amongst them have a lot of psychological issues and they want relief. No, the people in those tribes don't want fights every weekend. So they want people to get drunk. Because when they realize when people are drunk, they tend to have more fellowship together. Things tend to be more at ease. So the leaders of the tribes want grapes. Now where do they get the grapes? They need to import them from Gaul, which was a Roman province at the time. Gaul is what today called France. But to get the grapes, or they may even purchase vessels of wine directly, they need to pay in silver, or in gold, or in copper. And who is going to finance that? Where do they get all that currency? They need to get it from the people. And not only that, to receive the wine or the grapes, they need to communicate with the tribes in the south who live closer to Gaul. So likely the Romans will export the wine or the grapes to the tribes in the south, and from the tribes in the south they will be resold to the tribes in the north. Now it becomes obvious in this situation that when it comes to wine, or because they want to use the grapes for wine, not everyone can win. Because if the Romans ask a high price for their wine, then likely the tribes in the south will charge an extra price to those in the north because they need to have an income also. At the other hand, if the price is cheap and there's an overflow of wine into the British Isles, what happens after a while that the alcoholism gets so out of hand that now other folks wanted to stop. So you see how it goes now? Everyone has expectations, but not all expectations can be met equally. Some expectations need to be preferred and others need to be denied. So it's really a fight between interests. Now, why am I using the ancient British Isles to explain this example? It's because when it relates to prostitution, it's just like that. You have a community. Let's take the ancient British Isles again. And in a community, you need to regulate human sexuality, or else you'll have a lot of children that are born, but the fathers, the biological dads, who won't take responsibility. They just want to release their excitement and then they're gone. And if that happens too often, things get very messy in that community. And you also have sexual aggression, in which a woman may at first consent and later she regrets, and then she wants validation from others who pretend that the guy forced her. And then you have men who are so craving for the approval of a woman, and they will go after the guy that has been accused without informing, without us looking for evidence. And in that time, you didn't have cameras, nor you didn't have any of that. So how are you going to check whether an allegation of sexual misconduct was true or not? Now look, to prevent all of this destructive chaos, societies have sexual regulations. Number one of the sexual regulation is marriage, in which a woman consents to be the receiver of the sexual energy of a male. And the male, at the other hand, promises to the community that in exchange for having a place to release his sexual energy, he now complies with the safety of the community by contributing to the community when it comes to economic matters. So, in short, he will work and he will have a profession to contribute to the community, and as a compensation, he will have a woman who has agreed to receive his sexual energy. So that's really what marriage comes down to. It's a sex contract related to the economics of a community. But as explained before, for this to work, everyone must have, and every man must have a receiver of his sexual energy. But if you have a community in which there are more men than women, or there are more women than men, there's going to be frustration here. If there are more men than women, it's obviously a problem, because there are too few women, and men by design don't want to share their territory when it comes to sexual energy. They don't. On the other hand, if you have more women than men, then the women may turn on each other out of fear of not having a man, because there are too few men around. So there is conflict here. How do you solve this? Now, this is what they did back then. You have those priests, those pagan priests, that offer monetary compensation to certain families. And those families agree every generation to hand in a few of their daughters to the pagan priests. And those pagan priests, they subject those women to trauma rituals in which those women become so dysfunctional mentally that they are abhorrence to both men and women in the community. So nobody wants to be around them. People are frightened of them. And those women, you now put a charm on them, a sex charm that attracts men. It's really the demon pulling the energy of men. So what happens now is that you have those prostitutes that are placed in key positions, in key locations, and the demons are pulling the energy of men. So what happens now is that those women, those prostitutes, become the dump site of not only the sexual energy of men in general, because a lot of men don't even want to be involved with those women, but they become, a magnet for frustrated, angry men. And those men can now dump their negative energy on those women, while at the same time enjoying releasing a sexual energy. So the prostitutes are there to mask the conflict that's going on in society. Because either there are more women than men, or there are more men than women. Now, prostitution is, as you see it like this, is an institution to divert negative energy from society. You also have male prostitutes. Let's say there are more males than females. Then you can have those men who dress as women, who become the transgendered prostitutes. That also happened a lot. And because of that, now you have less men that are into finding a female mate, because a portion of them has become transgendered prostitutes. That's also how you solve the issue of not having enough mates for everyone. So prostitution offers a psychic income to society. The psychic income to everyone is, at least I'm not like that hooker over there. At least I'm not like that effed up kid over there. Look at her. She's spreading her legs everywhere. She's doing whatever she wants. She is man. You get what I'm saying? That's how they think about the prostitute. And by acting out against the prostitutes, the people of that society feel connected to one another. And that's how you keep them in coalition with one another to keep things going. So, a psychic income, as I explained before, is the satisfaction or the release one gets from participating in activity or doing their job. Society would not be able to function for a long time if there were no psychic incomes for its participants. Now you can also understand why racism or why supremacy is too hard to get rid of once it has taken root. Because let me give another explanation. Let's say you have a colony where you have British colonists. Now the British colonists have to work quite hard in the colony. And at the same time you have black slaves that also work hard. Now, when you look at the situation carefully, both are working very hard. And who benefits from the hard work? The slave owners, plantation owners, and the British government, who uses the produce to sell to other nations or on the black market. So both the black slaves as well as the European colonists or European migrants are exploited. But when people realize they're all exploited, sooner or later they'll explode, they'll have enough. So you want them to keep going. But there needs to be a benefit for them in participating. Now, what will happen is you will tell the European migrants that they are superior to those blacks over there, and you will grant them certain titles or certain privileges in society to convince them that they are superior. And at the same time, you make sure that only negative news of the black slaves are circulated in that community. By doing that, by exposing the European migrants to bad news about the black slaves all the time, they develop aversion towards the black slaves, and that provokes them into complying with society so that they aren't associated with those black slaves. So now they have a psychic income of belonging to the white population. And this psychic income blinds them from seeing that they are exploited just as much as the black slaves are. On the other hand, you also want the black slaves to collide and comply with society. So you convince them that the whites are against them. And you make sure that all the people that are at the top of the community are whites who act oppressively towards the black slaves. By doing this, the black slaves will feel connected to one another, and their common purpose becomes to either overrule or cope with what's going on. So in this case, on both sides, both at the black slaves side as on the side of the European migrants, folks have a psychic income, they have psychic benefits. And those psychic benefits blinds them from what's going on. And that's how you keep things going, and it goes on from generation after generation. But here's the ugly part. Those that at least realize they are exploited, sooner or later this spell will expire and they'll break free. But those that have been conditioned into thinking they are superior in comparison to the other, they will have a very hard time admitting they've been lied to. Not only because of pride, but because all their social relationships are founded on this hoax that they are superior. And because they consider themselves superior, they were also in denial of the defective people around them, because they were so distracted by that inferior group. And that inferior group doesn't have to be black slaves, it can also be people from another ethnicity. Because the so-called dominant group, or the group that's been conditioned in thinking they're dominant, because they've been conditioned in thinking they're special and they're superior, that sense of superiority blinds them from seeing and acknowledging that they have defective people amongst them. So now, predators amongst the so-called dominant groups have a carte blanche to exploit their own people from that same dominant group. So after a few generations, you also have a chronic manifestation of predators amongst the so-called dominant group. But because of the psychic benefits or the psychic income that they have of being the superior one, they just don't dare to admit what's going on. So now predators can exploit the dominant group and get away with it most of the time. And because everything in that society now depends on the dominant group thinking that they are superior, to deal with the predators amongst the dominant group would expose that they are not superior. And once that happens, it all falls apart. But those that were openly exploited, they are free. They've learned how to deal with oppression, and they most likely will move on after a while. So, what I just explained about racism doesn't only have to be between so-called blacks, so-called whites. It can also be between white ethnicities or between black groups also. When I explain about racism, that explains now what's going on and what we call the Western world. Now that white heritage is challenged, not only by the low birth rate of so-called white people and the mass influx of migrants into what they consider white countries. Now that that's happening, the people that belong to this so-called privileged group, they're only privileged in psychic benefits, not in actual benefits. They now feel threatened because they now see through the deception. But everything they have depends on that deception, so they don't want to see through the deception. So now they become desperate in a violent manner to preserve the deception. That is a psychic benefit, because everything to them depends on that psychic benefit, which isn't really a benefit at all. Now this video has been over an half hour. I didn't intend to make it this long, but I want to explain to you what psychic income is and what psychic rewards or psychic benefits are. Once you understand this, you'll understand things around you far better. Now you understand why certain problems just won't go away in society, because people don't want them to go away, because alternative would be that they need to deal with stuff, and they don't want that. Now you understand why people have things like once a thief, always a thief, or once a scapegoat, always a scapegoat. Why? Because once people have labeled you as a scapegoat or as a target, they don't want to let go of it, because to let go of it would mean they need to admit they were a perpetrator. That means they would have to give up certain claims about themselves and others. They don't want to go there. So once you've been labeled a target, according to them, it's your fault you've been labeled. If though you didn't, it wasn't your fault, they will still blame you to protect their own unexamined expectations. Now, I hope this video has edified you. Again, keep agreeing with Christ, because with Him there are true benefits. Be at peace.